The snow fell in a blinding curtain, a relentless siege that had buried the foothills for weeks. Winter had come to the high plains with a vengeance, and for Mai Lin, it was a quiet, cold war of survival. In her world, a dilapidated line shack leaning against the wind, warmth was a currency more precious than gold. She huddled by her small, sputtering fire, the icy air clawing at the thin fabric of her worn coat. Her only companion, a sturdy pony named Bao, stood nearby, his breath pluming in the frigid air. The day's labor mucking stalls at the nearest outpost had earned her a pittance and a handful of oats, just enough to stave off starvation for another few days. As darkness consumed the white landscape, a sound cut through the howl of the wind, the desperate, uneven beat of hooves. Mai Lin's hand went to the old, heavy revolver at her hip, a constant, cold companion in her solitude. A woman alone, especially a Chinese woman in this harsh land, learned to be ready for anything. Two shapes materialized from the swirling snow, a man slumped over his horse, clutching a small bundle to his chest. The horse, nearly spent, stumbled to a halt at the edge of her firelight. Help, the man's voice was a ragged whisper, nearly lost to the storm. Please, my daughter. Mai Lin's grip on her pistol tightened. Sympathy was a trap she had learned to avoid. That's far enough, she called out, her voice sharp and clear. State your business. The man swayed in the saddle. The firelight illuminated a face etched with exhaustion and fear. But it was the bundle in his arms that gave her pause, a little girl, no older than 7, her face flushed with fever. She's sick, the man rasped, his voice breaking. The blizzard, it came on too fast. We just need a place to wait out the storm. A fire. Please. Every instinct screamed at Mai Lin to send them away. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. Men in this land took what they wanted, leaving nothing but ruin behind. But then the child coughed, a weak, rattling sound that pierced Mai Lin's hardened heart. She looked at the man again. His clothes were worn from travel but well made, his boots were scuffed but of good leather. He looked less like a drifter and more like a father pushed to the edge of desperation. One night, Mai Lin said, her voice hard. You stay by the fire. You don't come near the shack. At sunrise, you're gone. The man's shoulders slumped with profound relief. Thank you, he whispered. He dismounted carefully, cradling the child as he settled her onto a bedroll near the flames. The little girl whimpered, her eyes fluttering but not opening. Mai Lin watched from a distance, her hand never straying far from her weapon. She had just let strangers into her camp, a mistake that in the West could cost a person everything. The fire was a fragile truce in the vast, frozen wilderness. Mai Lin sat on an old crate, her back to the shack, her gaze fixed on the newcomers. The man hadn't moved, his entire focus on the small girl shivering under his coat. What's her name? Mai Lin asked, her voice cutting through the silence. The man looked up, startled. Li, he said quietly. Mai Lin gave a curt nod. The child coughed again, a pained, harsh sound that made the man flinch. He touched her forehead, his jaw tightening. The fever is worse, he muttered to himself. After a moment's hesitation, Mai Lin stood. Stay put, she vanished into the shack, returning with a tin cup of hot broth and a small bundle of herbs. She knelt by the fire, her movements efficient. It's not much, she said, holding out the cup. But it's hot. The man stared at her, then at the offering. I don't know how to thank you. Don't, she replied flatly. Just take it. He accepted the cup, their fingers brushing for a second. Mai Lin pulled back as if burned, retreating to her crate. He coaxed the child to take small sips of the broth, his touch gentle and sure. What do I call you? He asked after a long silence. The man hesitated. Ronan. Where were you headed in a blizzard, Ronan? To the town of Redemption, he answered, his voice guarded. We had no choice. There was a story there, one he was not telling, but Mai Lin didn't press. Everyone out here had secrets. Redemption is a hard ride from here, especially in this snow, she said. You were lucky to find this place. Lucky, Ronan repeated with a bitter, fleeting smile. Anneli's breathing grew shallow, and my Lynn knew she couldn't just stand by. She needs the fever brought down, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She scooped snow into a bowl, melting it just enough to make the water bitingly cold. She took a clean cloth and, without asking permission, knelt beside Anneli and began pressing the compress to the child's hot forehead. Anneli stirred, her eyes fluttering open for a moment. They were glassy and unfocused, but she was looking at my Lynn. "Sure," my Lynn murmured, her voice unexpectedly soft. "You're safe. Just rest." Ronan watched her, an unreadable expression on his face. "You're good with her." My Lynn didn't look at him. "I had a younger sister once. She was taken by a fever like this." The words hung in the cold air, stark and final. Understanding, or perhaps guilt, flickered in Ronan's eyes. "That's why you'll stay put until this storm breaks," she said, her voice hard again. "No arguments." Ronan nodded slowly. No arguments. The night stretched on, a long, cold vigil under the falling snow. But something had shifted. It was not trust, not yet, but it was a start. The storm raged for 2 more days, trapping the trio in their isolated world. An unlikely domesticity settled over the camp. Ronan, without being asked, chopped firewood with a practiced, powerful swing, creating a formidable stack that would last my Lynn the rest of the winter. He patched the leaking roof and reinforced a wall that shuddered with every gust of wind, his work skilled and efficient. Anneli, her fever broken, slowly regained her strength. She was a quiet, observant child who began to follow my Lynn with wide, curious eyes. She watched as my Lynn mended a strap or checked on bow, her small presence filling a space in the camp that my Lynn hadn't realized was empty. "My mother taught me to sew," Anneli said one afternoon, her voice soft as she watched my Lynn's nimble fingers work a needle through thick leather. "She got sick a long time ago. Papa says she's an angel now." My Lynn's hand stilled. She looked from the child to the man stacking wood, a man shouldering a world of grief and responsibility. "I'm sure she would be very proud of you," my Lynn said gently. "You are a very brave girl, Anneli." That evening, the blizzard finally began to subside. They sat around the fire, the silence comfortable now. Anneli, nestled between them, was drifting off to sleep. "Tell me a story," she murmured. My Lynn glanced at Ronan, who offered a small, tired smile. "Don't look at me. My stories are all about land deeds and cattle prices." My Lynn smiled back. "All right." She gazed into the flames, a memory surfacing. "There was once a dragon that lived in the highest mountains," she began, weaving a tale her grandmother used to tell, a story of a lonely dragon who befriended a lost little girl. She spoke until Anneli was sound asleep in her father's arms. After Ronan carried his daughter inside, he returned to the fire. "That was a good story," he said. "My grandmother used to tell it to me," she replied, surprised at her own willingness to share. "She sounds like she was a wise woman." She was. "She taught me how to survive. How to be strong on my own." "You do more than survive," Ronan said quietly, his gaze steady. "You've made a life here. On your own terms." For the first time in a long time, someone was looking at her with respect, not pity or suspicion. "What about you, Ronan?" she asked softly. "Redemption has hotels. Why were you really out here in a blizzard with a sick child?" He stared into the flames for a long moment. "Running," he admitted. "From expectations. From a life that feels like it belongs to someone else. Sometimes you have to get lost to remember who you really are." My Lynn understood that better than he knew. "Well," she said, a faint smile on her lips, "you picked a hell of a place to get lost." "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe it was exactly where I needed to be." The third morning dawned bright and clear, the world outside blanketed in pristine, silent snow. The storm had passed. My Lynn emerged from the shack to see Ronan packing his saddlebags. Anneli sat nearby, her small face sad. The horses were saddled and ready. A strange, unwelcome ache settled in my Lynn's chest. "The trail should be passable now," Ronan said, not looking at her. We can make redemption by nightfall. Right, My Lin said, her voice rough. Good. Do we have to go, Papa? Unli asked, her lower lip trembling. I like it here. My Lin knelt to meet the little girl's eyes. I will see you again, she said, surprised to find she meant it. I promise. Aneli's face brightened. When? My Lin glanced at Ronan, who was watching them with an inscrutable expression. I don't know, little one. But a promise is a promise. Unli launched herself at My Lin, wrapping her small arms around her neck in a fierce, sudden hug. My Lin froze for a heartbeat before embracing the child tightly. Thank you for saving us, Unli whispered. When she pulled back, Ronan was standing there, hat in hand. I need to ride into the outpost, My Lin said abruptly, the lie tasting like ash. For supplies she couldn't watch them leave. She saddled Bao with jerky movements, swung into the saddle, and rode off without a backward glance. By the time she returned hours later, the sun was casting long, blue shadows across the snow. The camp was empty. The silence was a physical weight. The fire was banked, the woodpile neatly stacked, and the patched roof looked strong and secure. They were gone. Then she saw it, a small, cloth-wrapped bundle on the flat rock she used as a table. Inside was a heavy leather pouch filled with more coins than she had seen in her entire life. Beneath it lay a folded note. For the shelter, the kindness, and the reminder that decency still exists. This is not charity, but payment for a debt. You saved more than our lives. If you ever find yourself in need, come to the Phoenix Trading Company in redemption. Ask for me. Ronan Sterling. My Lin stared at the name. Phoenix Trading. The largest mining and railroad operation in the entire territory. The man who owned it, Ronan Sterling, was a legend, a phantom of wealth and power. He wasn't just a gunslinger, he was an emperor. And she had given him broth and herbs, never knowing she was sheltering one of the wealthiest men in the West. She sank onto her crate, the note clutched in her hand, the quiet camp suddenly feeling unbearably lonely. 3 weeks crawled by. My Lin tried to slip back into her old life, but the camp felt haunted by the memory of a little girl's laughter and a man's quiet respect. She hid Ronan's money away, unable to touch it. Pride was a bitter meal, but it was all she had. Then her world crumbled. Bao, her pony, began to limp. The stable master delivered the grim news. A bad sprain, deep in the tendon. He'll need months of rest. No work without Bao, her livelihood was gone. A few days later, her mucking job was given to a cheaper hand. By the end of the month, her food was nearly gone, and the relentless winter showed no signs of abating. One morning, desperate, she walked the miles to redemption, seeking any work she could find. She was sitting on a bench, defeated, when the postmistress called her name, holding out a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with a wax phoenix. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she broke the seal. Miss My Lin, the Phoenix Trading Company is seeking a territory representative to oversee our new community outreach initiatives. Your name has been personally recommended for this position, which involves distributing resources to remote settlements. The position offers a competitive salary and lodging. Please present yourself at our main office at your earliest convenience. Respectfully, Ronan Sterling. Pride warred with desperation. It felt like charity, a handout from a rich man. But then she thought of Bao, of her empty cupboards, of the brutal cold. This wasn't charity, it was a lifeline. Taking a deep breath, she crossed the street and walked into the imposing brick building of the Phoenix Trading Company. It was time to find out what came next. The inside of the Phoenix Trading Company was a different world, one of polished wood and quiet efficiency. A sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Mrs. Gable greeted her warmly. Miss Lin, we've been expecting you. Mr. Sterling spoke very highly of you. He did? My Lin asked, taken aback. He said you were resourceful, honest, and had more integrity than his entire board of directors, Mrs. Gable said with a smile. He's away on business, but he insisted we get you situated. The job is real, and it's important. You'll be helping families who have been forgotten. The salary was staggering, more money than she could have earned in 5 years. This was a real job, a chance to build a life, not just survive. My Lynn signed the papers, a tremor in her hand. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. That hope was nearly extinguished a week later. Mrs. Gable burst into her new, small office, her face pale. "We have a problem. Someone's been embezzling from the community fund, and the ledgers have your signature on the transfers." My Lynn's blood ran cold. "That's impossible." "I know," Mrs. Gable said. "But Duncan Croft is presenting it to the board tomorrow. He's calling for your termination and for criminal charges." Croft was one of Sterling's senior managers, a man who had looked down on My Lynn from the moment she arrived. He had waited until Ronan was gone to make his move. "Where is Mr. Sterling?" "In Denver. He won't be back until after the meeting." "What do I do?" My Lynn asked, the familiar weight of injustice pressing down on her. Mrs. Gable's expression hardened. "We fight," she said, rolling up her sleeves. "We have until 9 a.m. to prove your innocence. Let's get to work." They worked through the night, poring over ledgers and transaction records. It was a careful frame-up, but the forger had made mistakes. At 3 a.m., My Lynn found it. "Here," she said, her voice hoarse. "A transfer with my signature, dated 2 weeks before I was even hired." They found more discrepancies, transfers made on days she was miles away in the field, with signed witness statements to prove it. The final piece was a shell company the funds had been funneled to, a company they traced to Croft's own brother. By dawn, they had their proof. My Lynn walked into the boardroom with her head held high, Mrs. Gable at her side. Duncan Croft stood at the head of the table, smug and confident. "Gentlemen," he began, "I have uncovered a serious pattern of theft by our newest employee, Miss Lynn." "That's a lie," My Lynn's voice cut through the room. She dropped a stack of ledgers on the table. "You're the thief, Mr. Croft. And I can prove it." One by one, she laid out the evidence, the impossible dates, her verified alibis, and the damning link to his brother's company. The color drained from Croft's face. The room fell silent, the board members staring at him in disbelief. As he made a panicked move for the door, it swung open. Ronan Sterling stood in the doorway, his presence commanding the room. His gaze took in the scene, My Lynn, defiant and strong, Croft, frozen in guilt. "Going somewhere, Duncan." Ronan's voice was dangerously quiet. 2 federal marshals stepped in behind him. As they led a sputtering Croft away, Ronan turned to the board. "The meeting is adjourned." "Miss Lynn's innocence is beyond question," the board members filed out, leaving My Lynn and Ronan alone. "You didn't need me to save you," he said, a warm light in his eyes. "No," she agreed, a tired smile touching her lips. "But I'm glad you came anyway. Mrs. Gable's telegram reached me late last night. I rode straight through. I never doubted you for a second, My Lynn. I know who you are." He stepped closer. "I know you shared your fire when you had nothing. I know you saved my daughter. I know you survived on your own through sheer will. I know enough." The job was still hers, he said, if she wanted it. "I want it," she said without hesitation. "I want to make a difference." 2 years later, My Lynn stood at the opening ceremony for a new school in a remote mountain settlement, a project she had overseen from start to finish. Lee, now 9, cut the ceremonial ribbon to the sound of cheers. Ronan stood beside My Lynn, his quiet pride evident. Lee ran to them, hugging them both. "Are you two ever going to get married?" Lee asked with the blunt honesty of a child. "Or do I have to keep dropping hints?" My Lynn blushed, and Ronan coughed awkwardly. But as their eyes met over Aneli's head, a shared smile passed between them. Some things, they both knew, were worth the wait. Some fires, once lit in the heart of a winter storm, were never meant to go out. They just kept burning, steady and warm, lighting the way home.